Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.
Idaho Democrats have no chance of gaining majority control of the Idaho Senate this year. What they hope to be able to do is to win enough seats to make Governor John Evans's veto meaningful. That will take 15 Democratic senators. Tonight we'll look at 3 races that will be critical in determining each party's clout in the next session of the Idaho legislature. We'll look at the race between Republican Walt Yarborough and Democrat Claire Weatherall, between Democrat John Peavy and Republican Wes Trounson, and the race featuring Republican Terry Sferdston and Democrat Ray Oliver. Good evening. For the next 3 evenings here, we'll be spending our time looking at what could be the most significant political development to come from next Tuesday's election. The issue is the power of Idaho Republicans in the state legislature, or if you prefer, the veto power of the Democratic governor. Consistently over the last several years, Democrats have been able to win enough seats in the state Senate to sustain Governor John Evans's frequent use of a veto. At the moment, Republicans have 21 seats in the Senate, Democrats have 14. That's a safe margin that usually allows the governor's vetoes to stand, since Republicans only rarely are able to muster the 2/3 vote needed for a veto override. But reapportionment has enlarged the state Senate to 42 members, meaning that Democrats must hold on to the 14 seats they now have, plus pick up at least 1 more to assure that they can sustain John Evans's veto. If Republicans, on the other hand, are able to win at least 28 seats, they will have, at least in theory, a veto-proof state Senate. The stakes in all of this are very high, potentially affecting labor issues like right to work and the repeal of the state's prevailing wage law. The governor has used his veto in the past to derail those issues. And clearly a veto-proof state Senate would impact the governor's influence in the budget process. Tonight we'll focus on 3 key races for the state Senate, and we'll look at other races on Wednesday and Thursday nights. Producer Gary Richardson has our first report tonight on races where in each case a new reapportionment plan has pitted incumbent Republican and Democratic state senators directly against each other.
The new 12th legislative district in the far southwestern corner of the state throws together parts of the old 19th and 22nd districts and forces one-term Senator Claire Weatherall of Mountain Home in Elmore County to run against the Senate's most senior member, Walt Yarborough, who lives near Grandview in Owyhee County. Yarborough has served under several different legislative districting plans. Through them all, Owyhee County voters have been strong Yarborough supporters. But that all may change because of this place, the EnviroSafe hazardous waste dump located about 10 miles west of Grandview and only a few miles from Walt Yarborough's own ranch.
I don't know what we would have done here in Owyhee County without him, but we feel that over this EnviroSafe, the dump up here in Grandview, he just is all for, it's a necessary evil, and let it be. And
Joyce Collette lives within sight of the Yarborough Ranch. Cecilia Ellsworth lives within sight of the EnviroSafe facility.
Well, I feel like Walt Yarborough has really represented us well out in our community, being a farmer, and we're farmers too. We feel like he's really been good for us until we've really tried to work to get rid of this dump site. Now we find that he's not voting in a manner to help the people in this area.
I want to close the site and move it, and he seems to think that that isn't necessary. EnviroSafe has been fined thousands of dollars by the EPA, and I think that they have improved their act quite a little bit, but it still concerns me that it's surrounded by people, agriculture, and the Snake River. And I think that it's definitely a threat in its present location.
I live right here within 3 miles of it. I've watched it from the time it started. And I'm very, very concerned and do everything possible to see first that it's handled safely and that we can test it and monitor it, where if we get any leakage or anything, We know about it and we can close it down and get the thing out of here. Now, I could make myself a hero and quiet this all down if I just say I'm going to close it down. But I've checked these laws. I know the laws. They have a permit from the federal government. They're an independent business. And the only way we can close it down is to prove that it's an imminent health hazard. Now, most of these people have known me for years and years. I've been out here 34 years. And if they don't trust me enough to take my word, then I really don't want to represent them.
The fate of EnviroSafe has become an emotional issue in the campaign. Just how emotional was demonstrated when the candidates met on a Mountain Home street corner.
Have I? Tell me when.
Yarborough was upset with a statement Wetherill had made in the Mountain Home News.
I was the guy that got him to go out there and dig those damn things out. I was the guy that...
We've been friends for years and have known each other and visited. And it's just, it's very uncomfortable to do. We've agreed that we're going to remain friends in spite of the outcome of the race, and I hope that we can. We just have a few different views politically.
Ms. Wetherill and I have been friends for many years. I know her. And it's just hard to get into that. I think as a majority member of the majority party or the senior member, I am in a better position to get things done for the people in this district than a junior senator from the minority party. But that's just a personal thing. We've got quite a few issues, but they're the same. I've had a reputation of supporting business, industry all the time. 20 years ago, they came to me and they conned me into running for the Senate. They said it only took 60 days every 2 years, January and February. And I agreed to do that if they would support me, and they did. And that's how it got started. It possibly was a mistake. You know, when I first went in, all I had to represent was the 7,000 cowboys out here in Hawaii. And we knew each other, and it was real easy. I'd worked that over there. I'd built up a clientele, and I had a good following. And then you're given Elmore County, and they've got approximately 20,000 people, and we've got 7,000. And I have to run against an incumbent. I figure campaigning should be a full-time proposition, not just before the election go around and beg people for votes. And I have always tried to take care of any problem any constituent had. I've tried to support every community activity like the 4-H programs. If I need to touch somebody, I usually call them. I do some telephoning because I can contact more people by phone than I can running all over the country to see them. A rugged individualist. I kind of think that if we want something, we should go out and work for it, not expect
Claire Wetherill runs a title insurance business in Mountain Home. At election time, her office looks like a local campaign headquarters.
Ever since we've been involved in politics, we have more or less used the office for distribution of campaign materials. Having a new area in Owyhee County, I have to spend a lot of time down there to make myself known, and I'm doing a lot of advertising. I've gone door to door in some of the areas. I am more people-oriented. I think he's more business-oriented. I have always been involved in health and education and the welfare of the people, and I am interested in people programs.
The subordination of Idaho Power Company's Swan Falls water right for upstream farm development is another area where Wetherill finds Yarborough vulnerable.
He voted against subordination, and for what reason, I have no idea. I voted to subordinate. There probably is no need at the present time for further development, but I don't think that our water should be lost to outside interests or outside the state interests. I think that in years to come we're going to be needing it.
My feeling was that if we as a legislature could take the only right that I can think of that has gone clear to the Supreme Court, then nobody's water right would be secure from there on. That, to me, was very important because we base everything on the water rights. Another thing that becomes involved here is if you take that off out there, and in dry years you have to replace it with coal-fired or other sources, it's going to increase everybody's electrical rate from 25 to 52%.
Jack Streeter is a Mountain Home realtor and strong Yarborough supporter. Well known as a booster of agricultural development, he thinks Yarborough's stand on subordination may have hurt him.
Got the toughest race that he's ever had because he has a formidable opponent. There's credence to the statement: if they can take it away from a corporation, they could take it away from an individual. And I think he wanted to champion that part of the cause to the extent that it was politically damaging to him.
Swan Falls subordination is also an issue in the Senate race in District 22. The new 22nd legislative district stretches from the Stanley Basin about 40 miles to the north over those mountains there, down through the Wood River Valley here to the Snake River about 80 miles to the south. The new district combines parts of the old 21st and 23rd districts and forces two incumbent senators to run against each other. John Peavy, a Blaine County rancher, is seeking his second term as a Democrat, having served 7 years in the Senate as a Republican in the 1970s. Republican Wes Trounsend is seeking his second Senate term. He was Gooding County assessor for 30 years. In this farming community, Swan Falls subordination has become a major issue in the campaign.
He backs the Idaho Power, and I back the water users. I think that's much difference. But there's got to be a balance. We live just a few miles from the Snake River, and when I see the amount of water flowing during flood time, which we've had in the past few years, and seeing it that it cannot be used, it's a tremendous amount of water goes through that we are not using and we could use.
You know, I'm one of the key players in this thing. I helped get this thing started eight years ago, and I couldn't be more pleased today. I'll tell you, it's there's a lot of possibilities now to do the sensible things with that river. But when you get down to the bottom of the river, you know, first come, first serve. You can take it all kind of a state law isn't in anybody's interest, including the existing farmers, and that's what we had. And we don't anymore. I'm really encouraged that we can do this, do what's right.
Peavy was one of the parties to a complaint that ultimately brought the issue of the Idaho Power Company's Snake River water right to the Idaho Supreme Court, the legislature, and the governor's office, where an agreement was signed last week by the power company, the governor, and the attorney general.
I think to a large extent the question of subordination or non-subordination has been dealt with. We've partially subordinated that water right, and so we've struck a balance. I suspect, though, that if you have innovative candidates, they're going to be able to find plenty to talk about. I do know that in the Peavy-Trounsend race, Senator Peavy is trying to keep the issue alive and take credit, which I wouldn't particularly agree with the senator on who's to be thanked for what actually happened, but you know, I think he'll probably try to make an issue.
I think it was a step forward, but as far as working the whole thing out, no, it didn't. It was kind of a compromise agreement, and I think overall picture, the intent was good, but I think the timing was wrong. I think that I would have rather seen it after the election, so that it would have been no issue. I mean, election wouldn't have been an issue. I don't like the timing.
I'm really encouraged about the possibilities on this settlement. There's going to be a lot of decisions to be made. You know, how long is this 600 CFS that we have for development going to last us?
Last week, Peavy spoke to the Haley Rotary Club when the scheduled speaker, the Attorney General, Peavy's frequent adversary on subordination, stayed in Boise to sign the Swan Falls settlement.
I'm really sorry to have missed the Attorney General's speech, but it seems like I'm running against two guys, my opponent and then the AG. He just seems to run around my district and make speeches. Luckily, I can find out where he's going to be and kind of be there to answer questions.
I've been in his district twice. I was at the Ketchum Rotary Club this week, and I was at the Gooding Chamber of Commerce last week, but those have been the only 2 trips I've made there. In my initial speech, until there was some hot questioning by what had turned out to be a debate opponent afterwards during the question and answer session, I mentioned neither candidate. I did use the opportunity to point out the legitimate problem that we had in the agreement, and I decided that that had to take precedence over saying who had been supportive of the effort of getting consideration for the upstream folks during the legislature. And of course, Mr. Trounsden had been.
Wes Trounsden is a low-key campaigner. Last week, the highlight of his campaign came when he met up with U.S. Senator Jim McClure's bus in Wendell and followed along in his motorhome on a tour of the district.
I'm very conservative. I feel that I think of the taxpayers, and the taxpayers have a certain limit that they can pay, and after that limit's there, we can't spend anymore. Putting my name out in Blaine County, I'm not as well known naturally, and I've been up in the Blaine County area. I've had some brochures out. I've talked to people that anyone that want to talk to me. I've let everyone know up in Blaine County, as well as Camas and Gooding and Lincoln County, that on the brochures I've had my name and my address, my phone number, and I've had a very nice response.
When the McClure tour pulled into Ketchum, Peavy's winter home, the Peavy partisans were there to greet them. John Peavy has been campaigning hard, putting up signs, visiting senior citizen centers, speaking at service clubs.
I like Wes. He's a fine old gentleman, but we differed on several issues. He voted to raise the sales tax 2 years ago. I voted against raising the sales tax. He voted to continue the exemption on the nuclear facility at ARCO. I've consistently led the fight to try to collect those taxes from the federal government so we wouldn't have to turn to our own people to raise the sales tax on our own citizens. I've worked, I led the charge at least half the time to try to pry that bill out that would have created an Idaho Department of Commerce to help the business climate in Idaho. And Idaho is the only state in the nation without one. It was the #1 priority of the state chambers of commerce. Mr. Trounsden voted against that.
We already have the Department of the Division of Commerce, we already have that. It's not a bureau yet, but the governor, as you refer to it as DECA, it already is in existence. The governor represents the state of Idaho in the foreign countries, and I just don't feel that we should build up another bureau into a department where now it's a division.
Most observers, Republicans and Democrats, believe the 2 Democrats in those races, John Peavy and Claire Weatherall, are ahead at the moment. But everyone who's been watching the contest, the candidates included, believe that they will be very close by this time next week. Incidentally, of the 42 senators to be chosen statewide next week, 17 are already home free without opposition, 10 Republicans and 7 Democrats. One current member of the Republican leadership team in the state Senate is facing a tough race in Kootenai County. In District 2, Republican Senator Terry Sferdston is getting a tough challenge from Democrat Ray Oliver. Producer Ann Summerall has that report.
Up until this year, people in Kootenai County voted in 4 different districts. Now with reapportionment, the county is united, and some incumbent legislators find themselves running in new territory. The Democrats would really like to pick up a seat here, and candidate Ray Oliver hopes the new district will help him oust incumbent Republican Terry Sferdston. The candidates are spending between $8,000 and $10,000 on their campaigns. Both are using newspapers, pamphlets, radio, TV, yard signs, and door-to-door campaigning techniques to solicit support. Aside from campaigning strategies, the candidates have little in common. Oliver attacks Sferdston on his voting record, implying that he was not a full-time senator for Kootenai County.
I think his biggest problem area is his voting record. his absenteeism during the last session. Of the 327 votes that the Senate acted on, both House and Senate votes, he was absent for 100 of those votes. I don't think that's a real representation for Kootenai County and all. I think we need a full-time senator.
He accused me of having a poor attendance record in the Senate, and that sounds, that's easy to say. I missed 3 days out of the Senate, and 2 of those days I was on government business. One day I was attending a conference that I happened to be the president of, so I didn't have any choice. But while I was gone, I paired all of my votes, which is the procedure we use to have our vote counted if we are absent. And of course, the only time they didn't use my paired vote was when it was a unanimous vote or it wasn't needed. Either it would have passed or been rejected without my votes. I think I missed about 40 votes on the Senate floor.
Although Senator Sfertston is the Assistant Majority Leader for the Idaho State Senate, Oliver feels his position has done little, if anything, for North Idaho.
I wonder most of the time if he really represents North Idaho. It's been my observation that when we do elect senators or representatives from North Idaho to go down to Boise, they normally fall in with the leadership and the majority party from South Idaho. And that's been one of the big complaints that we in North Idaho have, is that anytime we send Republicans down, we know we've lost that united bloc to represent North Idaho.
Because oftentimes you'll go into a caucus, you'll have your own ideals you want to present, but you'll end up many times voting with the majority of that caucus. And so you'll tend to stick closer to the party platform than oftentimes those individual feelings you might express during the campaign.
He introduced into the State Affairs Committee, a select committee in the Senate made up of the leadership, a bill to increase that drinking age. And you would think that if he were an effective leader, he could at least got that bill printed. He didn't have the support of that committee, made up of 6 Republicans and 4 Democrats. He still didn't even have the ability to get that bill printed.
I carried a drinking age bill last year to try and raise the drinking age to 20 years old so we wouldn't have the 19-year-old high school students have the availability of liquor, and he's used that against me by saying I couldn't even get it out of committee. But it just became a very political issue, and there wasn't any hope for its passage this last year.
Oliver's role as lobbyist and executive director of the Idaho Association of Highways is interpreted by Sfertston as a conflict of interest.
I feel that is a conflict of interest, and he should willingly on his own resign from those positions.
I do know that there would be a conflict of interest if I were to go to Boise to act as a lobbyist, a paid lobbyist, to represent Idaho Association of Highway Districts and still take a seat in the Senate. And I could not do that and would not do that.
You would then resign if you were to become the senator for Legislative District 2?
I would resign as their paid lobbyist.
Would you still hold the office of executive director?
Yes, I think I would.
The candidates disagree on other issues like reapportionment and right to work.
When it comes to reapportionment, well, anything would be better than what we have. And it's too bad that we ended up with a reapportionment plan that gives some legislators the overview of, say, 4 or 5 counties, because the people in those counties really do not know who represents them.
It brings about gerrymandering. You'll recall that during the last few sessions and all, that the legislators have been made up of 70% Republican, but they were only elected by about 51% of the majority in Idaho. And there's a lot of areas then that weren't truly represented under that gerrymandering, and we need to keep those county lines so that we're not all split up.
The right to work issue is probably one of the first questions that businesses coming to the state of Idaho ask. They don't ask if we have a Department of Commerce, they ask if we have a right to work law. And I believe in freedom of employment. People should have the right to negotiate their own wages as they choose. If they choose to be a union member, fine, let the union work with them and negotiate that wage. But they also should have the right to be independent of that if they choose. So I am in favor of right to work legislation.
I'm opposed to any new right to work legislation.
Is there any particular reason for that?
Well, I think we're doing all right now, and I think if some people had their way, we would have our working people working for $2 an hour. And I think there's a place for unions, and it's my understanding that the whole purpose of the right to work is to undermine union and to cut into the working man's ability to take care of his family needs.
Another issue is the initiative to remove the sales tax on food products.
I am opposed to the initiative.
I think I would favor that removal of the sales tax from food.
I believe that we'd have to come up with, what, $25 million more? That's the guesstimate that we're working with. So taxes would have to be raised somewhere along the line. I think it would have to come through an increase in the sales tax.
Well, the only tax that I would think at this point, not having all the figures before me and having digested those, I would probably favor a increase in the sales tax.
Both are optimistic that they will be representing Legislative District 2 in Boise.
I believe that running for the assistant majority leadership position has brought an office to North Idaho, and I can sit in not only in the majority caucus, but we have our weekly meetings with the governor during the legislative process, and we can solve some problems, and particularly those pertinent to North Idaho, in those sessions. So I think I can bring some things to people that cannot be achieved by bringing in a junior member into the legislature.
I've served on the Worley Highway District Board for 13 years, and during that 13 years I've missed one meeting. And I feel that if I were elected, I would be a full-time senator for Kootenai County and work hard at it, and I know I could best represent Kootenai County.
After earlier counting Republican Sverdston as one of the Republican incumbents who could be in danger, Republican leaders statewide now believe that he has moved over into the almost safe category in terms of his re-election. Tomorrow night we'll be looking at the other Kootenai County Senate race where Democrats think they have an even better shot at a victory. The race there between Democrat Mary Lou Reed and Republican Dennis Carlson. Also tomorrow night, a report out of southwestern Idaho on the Ada County Senate race between Democrat Darrell Salaz and Republican Bernie Rakoczy. And from the Pocatello area tomorrow, we'll have a report on a race that could be the most important of all for Democrats on Election Day, featuring Republican Rusty Barlow and Democrat Dwight Horsch. Finally, a footnote on just how significant the governor's veto power has been in the state Senate. John Evans has used his veto over 100 times over the last 4 years, often as a way to force changes in budget bills. In that time, on significant issues, the governor has had his veto overridden only once. The stakes are indeed very high. We'll be back tomorrow night. I'm Mark Johnson. Good night.
Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.